Good morning, and welcome to the first of two videos on patterns of chromosomal inheritance. This is really the beginning of Unit 6, which is all about genetics. All right, and genetics is divided in part into two major parts. The first is what goes on at the molecular level in terms of inside the cells, specifically inside the nucleus and the DNA and what happens with the DNA. The second part is how that affects the outward look of you. All right. What your hair color is, what your eye color is, how many fingers you have on your hands, and that sort of thing. But we're going to start today in this video with patterns of chromosomal inheritance. So we're going to start inside the cell. And then in the next chapter, we'll talk about how those DNA changes can affect your outlook. Okay. So generally speaking, and we talked about this a little bit when we talked about reproduction, but most humans, the vast majority, have 46 chromosomes in their cells, all right, in their nuclei. But those chromosomes aren't just, 46 random individual chromosomes. They actually come in 23 pairs, all right? Now, the chromosomes sit inside the cell's nucleus. Now, where do those pairs come from? Well, it turns out that genetically, chromosomally, you are 50% your mother and 50% your father. No two ways about it, all right? You have 22 chromosomes, which are called autosomes, and one set that controls your gender. So there's 22 pairs of autosomes and one pair of sex chromosomes. Now, the pairs are what we call homologous chromosomes. So let me try to make it a little simpler. If let's say you have two copies of chromosome number one, and one of those came from your mother, and one of them came from your father. You have two copies of chromosome number six. One of them came from your mother, and one of them came from your father. You have two copies of chromosome number 17. One of them came from your mother, and one of them came from your father. And later on in this chapter, we'll talk a little bit about how you will produce offspring if and when you ever decide to reproduce. You will take your chromosomes and you will divide them in half, and each of your sperm or eggs will contain one copy of one copy of number two, one copy of number three, one copy of number four, and so on. Okay, now the vast majority of the cells in your body are what we call body cells or somatic cells. These have 46 chromosomes, and we refer to that as 2N or diploid, where the N refers to the chromosome number. Now, the chromosome number in humans is 23. You have 23 different kinds of chromosomes, even though you have two of each of those kinds of chromosomes. All right. So when you have a cell that has all 46, you call that cell a diploid cell. And most of the cells in your body are diploid. However, you do have specialized cells in your gonads, your testes or your ovaries, which are called haploid cells. And the reason for this is that they only have 23 chromosomes, one N or just N chromosomes. And those are your sex cells. All right, those are the chromosomes that you'll pass on to your children. Now, this is an illustration of it's actually a photograph of what we call a karyotype. Now, back in the old days, what would happen is you would find a cell that was going through mitosis where the chromosomes were visible. And you would literally take a photograph of what you saw in the microscope slide, and then you'd cut out all of the chromosomes. And then you'd match them up and you'd glue them. And so this was a rudimentary way to look for chromosomal abnormalities. We'll get to that a little bit later on. But what I want you to notice from this illustration is that there are two of each pair of chromosomes. There's two number 1s, two number 8s, two number 13s, two number 16s, and so on. The only difference is, in this case, there's only one what we call X chromosome and one Y chromosome. That makes this individual a male. All right. Males are a little bit different when it comes to their chromosome count than females are. Females have two copies of chromosome X, whereas males have chromosome X and chromosome Y. Now, the other thing that you should see is that each of these chromosomes is in a pair. Right? They're actually tightly wrapped together. And so these chromosomes have replicated in preparation for cell division. And we'll get to that in just a second. Okay, so from the moment of your conception, when the sperm from your father and the egg from your mother came together, and again, nobody likes to think about that moment, but it happened for all of us. But from that moment forward, the cell that was initially you entered the cell cycle, and every single one of your somatic cells has continued that cycle as you aged and grew. Now, we start the cell cycle at this point right here, all right, and we're going in a clockwise direction in this diagram. The cell cycle goes through four major phases, but we divide it into two parts. The one that's illustrated with the purple band all the way around the edge here, that's called interphase. And during this stage, the cell is growing and replicating certain organelles and that sort of thing. And we divide the interphase into three parts. G1, which stands for growth 1. The cell doubles its organelles. All right, so you double the number of mitochondria, you double the number of Golgi bodies and ribosomes and all the other cell organelles that we talked about earlier in the year. During the S stage, all right, this stands for synthesis. There's a little bit of growth, but the most important thing that happens here is that the DNA replicates, and you end up with two copies of each of the chromosomes. Then we enter G2, which is growth and the final preparations for cell division. And then we enter phase 2. Now, the second phase here is often referred to as mitosis. But in reality, there's two things that are happening here. Mitosis, which is the division of chromosomes, and cytokinesis, which is the division of everything else. All of the organelles, all the cytoplasm, all of that stuff. All right, it has to be divided equally. And the net result of this whole process is that you end up with two identical cells, at least genetically, at the end of the cycle. All right. So you start out with one cell, you end up with two cells that look exactly like the original cell did. All right. Now, the chromosomes themselves contain DNA and protein. Most students, for some reason, are under the illusion that chromosomes only are made of DNA, and that's not really true. The DNA itself is wrapped around specialized proteins called histones, and together, the DNA and the histones make up a material we call chromatin. Now, during or right after the mitotic process, when you've got a brand new cell, the chromosomes look like the one that we see here on the right. All right, a single chromosome. This little knob here is called a centromere, and that's made of proteins and some other materials that hold the chromosome together. Now, when you enter the S phase of interphase, the cells duplicate their chromosomes, all right? So we have duplication, and you end up with this. Now, the thing that you need to understand is that we have two sister chromatids, one on the left, one on the right, okay? But this point here and this point here are identical, okay? Same DNA structure. And this point here and this point here are identical. And this point here and this point here and this point here and this point here, they're all the same. All right. And from the S phase until the end of mitosis, we end up having what we call sister chromatids. But because they're still held together, we consider this whole thing one chromosome. So this is one chromosome for G1 up until S, and this is one chromosome from S through mitosis. All right. And then this thing on the right splits in half to form two of these, which then go to two different cells. Okay. Okay. Now, so what happens in mitosis? Well, essentially, the end of the story is that a diploid cell makes and divides an exact copy of its nucleus. All right. And so genetically, the two daughter cells are exactly the same as the parent cell, the original cell. And the purpose of mitosis is for cell growth and cell repair. All right. To add more cells to your body and to repair damaged cells. Now, and maybe replace damaged cells. Now, the one thing that I do want you to notice about the picture on the top here is that this nucleus contains 4 chromosomes. So the diploid number of this cell is 4. 2n equals 4. Now, what I also want you to notice is that inside the nucleus, there are 2 long chromosomes here and here, and there are 2 short chromosomes here and here, all right? I'm going to call the long chromosomes chromosome number 1, and I'm going to call the short chromosomes chromosome number 2. All right, now why are they red and blue? Well, chromosomes are not red and blue in real life, but in this illustration, we've made the paternal chromosomes, the father's chromosomes, blue, and the maternal chromosomes, red. All right, the mother's chromosomes are red. Notice that you've got one long blue and one long red. All right, so the blue one came from your dad, and the red one came from your mom. Notice that you've got 2 short chromosomes, one red and one blue. The red one came from your mother, and the blue one came from your father. Okay. Now, during the S phase of interphase, each of these chromosomes doubles in and becomes duplicated. All right. So now we have duplicated chromosomes. So still, in this case, I have 4 chromosomes in the nucleus, even though each of the chromosomes consists of 2 sister chromatids. All right. But again, notice you've still got 2 short ones and 2 long ones. All right. So 2 chromosome number 2s and 2 chromosome number 1s. Even though they've been duplicated, they're still held together. Now, once mitosis occurs, each of these chromosomes splits down the middle. I'm trying to draw a straight line through here. All right, but each one splits down the middle. And so one long blue goes left, one long blue goes right. One long red goes left, one long red goes right. One short red goes left, one short red goes right. One short blue goes left, one short blue goes right. And so the end result of mitosis is 2 different cells, each of which contains one long red and one long blue, one short red and one short blue. So the 2 daughter cells that you see down here, all right, these are identical to the parent cell, the mother cell, if you will, up here. All right. Notice that the one cell on the top and the 2 cells on the bottom are identical. Okay. So at the end of this video, I would like you to go to the original PowerPoint here and watch this video on mitosis. it just because it'll illustrate some of these things and do it in an animated fashion, not just looking at a picture, but actually show and explain how some of these things actually work. Okay, so again, when this video is over, go to the PowerPoint and use the hyperlink that you see here in order to watch this video about mitosis. Okay, now there's another process here. Although the vast majority of your cells undergo mitosis on a regular basis, there are specialized cells that are found in your gonads that don't do mitosis, but rather they do meiosis. And so in this case, we have two nuclear divisions, and in the end, they make four haploid cells. Four cells that only have one copy of each chromosome as opposed to having two copies. All right. Remember, the end result of mitosis is one number one from mom and one number one from dad. All right. In meiosis, you get one number one and one number two. All right. Doesn't matter if it's from mom or dad. And this process is used to make sperm or eggs, depending upon your gender. So it only occurs in the sex cells, all right, the cells that are found in your testes or ovaries. Now, just like mitosis has four phases, meiosis has 8 phases. All right, there's 4 each in each of the two divisions, meiosis I and meiosis II. Now, overall, we start out with the same cell here, the same mother cell that we had in the previous diagram. And notice, we start out with a diploid chromosome number of 2n = 4. However, the chromosomes duplicate. What am I doing? Sorry about that. The chromosomes duplicate the same way, and so we still have a 2n = 4 cell. Notice that each of the chromosomes is duplicated here. But we then go through meiosis I. And in meiosis I, notice that each chromosome does not split. All right. Remember in mitosis, the two sister chromatids, they were together and then they split up. Notice here they didn't split, but half of the chromosomes go left and half go right. Now, in this particular diagram, randomly, the short blue and the long red went left, and the short red and long blue went right. But it could just as easily be 2 blues on one side and 2 reds on the other. All right, it's random. Then these two cells, these two nuclei, I should say, their chromosomes actually then do split, and you end up with 4 cells, each of which contain only 2 chromosomes. Now, because the diploid number was 4, the haploid number is 2. And so these cells here in this row, all the way across, each of these represents a sperm or an egg. All right. Notice they've only got half of the chromosome number that we found in the original cell. All right. So compare the cells in the bottom row to the cell that you see up here, and you'll notice that the chromosome number is very, very different. All right. So that's an overview of meiosis. Now, a couple of interesting things happen during the first meiotic division. During prophase 1, the homologous chromosomes actually come together and they pair up, all right? And so you've got the 2 sister chromatids of mom's number 1 and the 2 sister chromatids of dad's number 1, and they all kind of intertwine. See how they're all mixed up here in this? All right, so that's chromosome number 1. And this over here is chromosome number 2. And in essence, there are 2 chromosomes in each of those circles I just drew, and they're all intertwined. And each of those chromosomes has 2 copies of each DNA molecule. Now, in metaphase 1, they line up at the cell equator, and then in anaphase 1, they split up. Okay, and so you end up with 2 daughter cells that each have 23 duplicated chromosomes. Now, in the one thing that I do want you to notice is very particularly right here. Notice that there's a little piece of blue on the red and a little piece of red on the blue. What's going on there? All right, well, that is what's known as crossing over. Crossing over is the exchange of genetic information between non-homologous sister chromatids during synapsis. So what happens here is that, for example, let's say this is dad's chromosome number 6, and this is mom's chromosome number 6. Now, they have noticed that they've already duplicated, all right? And so each of those chromosomes is composed of 2 sister chromatids. However, they come together during this process called synapsis, and this does not happen during mitosis, only during meiosis. And what can happen is you can have what's called a crossing over event, all right? And during crossing over, a small piece of the end of mom's chromosome and a small piece of the end of dad's chromosome will actually break off and switch places. And so notice what you see here. All right. In this picture, you've now got a little piece of mom's chromosome on the end of dad's chromosome number 6, and a little piece of dad's chromosome on the end of mom's chromosome number 6. And so these form what we call recombinant DNA. And you can see that down here on the bottom. All right. So in this case, we have 2 parental chromosomes. All right. This one, so this is dad's original chromosome number 6. This is mom's original chromosome number 6. But these 2 here, the recombinant daughter chromosomes, are not any longer purely dad's or purely mom's. They've got a little bit of mom's DNA on dad's chromosome and a little bit of dad's chromosome on DNA on mom's chromosome. Okay. Now, this occurs during the prophase 1 of meiosis, all right? And it tends to increase the genetic variation within that, within those individuals, and of course, within a species. Okay. Now, in Meiosis II, and notice we've already represented some crossing over right here, for example. But now, Meiosis I has already occurred. And so now I've got mom's chromosome number 1 and dad's chromosome number 2 here, all right, with a little bit of crossing over, and dad's chromosome number 1 and mom's chromosome number 2 over here. All right, so these 2 cells are not identical. All right, so after meiosis I, the 2 cells are no longer identical. Remember that after mitosis, you got 2 identical daughter cells. After meiosis I, you now have 2 different cells. All right, then we go through meiosis II, and in meiosis II, the chromosomes condense again, but now they split right down the middle. All right. And so you end up dividing the pairs of chromosomes into 4 total cells. And the result of this is 4 daughter cells with 23 unduplicated chromosomes. All right. Now remember, chromosome number in a typical human cell is 46. Right now, we've only got 23. And these are sperm or eggs. Okay, so this video is similar to the first one. The difference is that this is about meiosis instead of mitosis. All right, so when this video is over, please go through and go to the original PowerPoint, click on the hyperlink that you see here, and watch this video as well. Or you can simply copy it and paste it into a browser. All right, and I think, yeah, that will be all for video number one. Remember, this is the first of two videos on chromosomal inheritance. All right, and I hope you learned something.